The last thing my grandfather ever said to me was find the box. Not I love you, not goodbye, not take care of yourself, find the box. 4 days later, I saw my father standing alone on the Rock River Bridge at sunrise with a small wooden case in his hands. He looked over both shoulders like a man throwing away a weapon. Then he dropped it over the railing and watched it disappear into the black freezing water. I should have stayed in my car. I should have let it sink. Instead, I ran. By the time I reached the edge of the river, my father was already driving away. The water below was brown and violent and cold enough to stop a heart. I saw the box for 1 second before it vanished beneath the surface. I jumped anyway. When I came up, I was choking. My hands were numb. My shoes were gone. My knees were cut open on the rocks. But I had the box pressed against my chest like it was breathing for me. And when I forced the latch open on the muddy bank, I understood something that changed my life forever. My grandfather knew he was going to die. He knew his son would lie about him after he was gone, and he had left behind enough proof to destroy everything they tried to bury. My name is Imogen Conway. I am 33 years old. If you have ever been the one who stayed while everyone else walked away, then stay with me for this story. And if that kind of truth means something to you, then subscribe right now. Like this video. Then comment the city you are watching from and the name of the person you would never abandon. Because what I pulled out of that river did not just expose my parents, it exposed 22 years of betrayal. And to understand why that box mattered, you need to go back with me to the day my parents left me behind with a pink suitcase and never really came back. It was October of 2002. I was 9 years old. My mother drove me to my grandfather Patrick Conway's house on a gray afternoon that smelled like rain and dead leaves. I remember the front steps were wet. I remember my suitcase was too small for forever. I remember my father did not even carry it inside. My mother knelt in front of me and fixed my collar like she was sending me to school instead of abandoning me. She said, "Grandpa is going to take care of you for a little while. Mommy and Daddy need time to work some things out." I was 9. I did not know that adults can lie with soft voices and gentle hands. I thought a little while meant maybe a week, maybe 2. Maybe until Thanksgiving. It meant the rest of my childhood. What no one explained to me at the time was that my father, Neil Conway, was addicted to gambling. Not casual gambling. Not weekend poker with friends. The kind of gambling that eats through rent money and grocery money and then starts chewing through the people around it. He and my mother Bryn had blown through their savings at riverboats and casinos across the Midwest. They were dodging creditors. They were drowning in debt. And I was one more responsibility they did not want to carry while they were running from the mess they made. My grandfather opened the front door before my mother knocked. He had a way of standing very still when something hurt him. He looked at my suitcase, then he looked at me, then he looked at my parents. No one said what everyone already understood. My father mumbled something about a short-term arrangement. My mother kissed the top of my head. My grandfather placed one hand on my shoulder and the other on the handle of my little pink suitcase. Then my parents left. No long goodbye, no promise to call every night, no explanation I could understand. I stood in my grandfather's living room and listened to the car pull away. I remember counting the seconds until the sound disappeared because some childish part of me thought if I counted correctly, they might come back. They did not. My grandfather led me into the kitchen and poured me a glass of milk. The kitchen smelled like coffee and old paper and the lemon soap he always used on the counters. He sat across from me at the table and waited until I stopped staring at the door. Then he said something I did not understand at all. He said, "Do not worry, Imogen. I am going to teach you something important. I am going to teach you how to keep track of the truth." At 9 years old, that sounded like one more strange adult sentence. At 33, it sounds like the reason I survived. My grandfather had been a pharmacist in Madison, Wisconsin for 37 years. He believed in labels and timing and exact measurements. His whole life was built on the idea that details matter because people can get hurt when details are sloppy. He read newspapers with a pen in his hand. He balanced his checkbook to the cent. He folded receipts. He filed warranties. He dated everything. Even leftovers in the refrigerator had labels. When I was 11, he gave me my first notebook. Plain cover, college ruled. On the first page, he wrote documentation for Imagigen, practice notes. Then he told me this: write down what you observe, not what you assume, not what you are afraid happened, what actually happened. Dates, times, details, because memory changes when people need it to. Paper does not. I started using that notebook for everything. Things I saw at school, conversations I thought were strange, books I read, teachers I liked. The day my mother called and promised to visit then did not show up. The way my father only seemed to appear around birthdays and holidays and tax refund season. Without knowing it, I was learning the one skill my grandfather knew I would need most. Because my parents were not gone, that would have been simpler. They drifted in and out of my life like debt collectors with familiar faces. They always came back when they needed money. They never came back because they missed me. Christmas of 2005. My father arrived carrying a bottle of cheap wine and a grin that meant trouble. He talked about an investment opportunity. He needed $5,000. He said it would turn around in 30 days. He said he would pay Grandpa back with interest. He did not pay him back. 2008. My mother called in tears. Medical emergency. Insurance issue. $8,000 needed immediately. My grandfather wrote the check that afternoon. The insurance issue never got resolved because there had never been one. 2012. Business loan, $12,000. This time it was different. This time it was legitimate. This time my father was serious. He was not serious. 2016. Legal fees. $15,000. They had gotten into trouble that was supposedly not their fault. They needed help just to get through the month, and every time my grandfather helped. Not because he believed them, because he was recording them. He kept an old receipt spike on his desk from his pharmacy days, one of those sharp metal rods mounted on a base. Every note they wrote. Every promise, every fake repayment plan, every text message he printed, every scribbled IOU. Onto the spike it went. Year after year, the stack thickened like a paper graveyard of lies. When I was 26 and already working as a clinical pharmacist at UW Health, I finally asked him the question that had been burning in me for years. Why do you keep giving them money? He did not even look up from his papers. Because I am documenting something. I asked what he meant. He said you will understand later. That was how he always answered when the truth would hurt before it could help, and he was almost always right. By the time I turned 32, I had spent more of my life with my grandfather than I ever had with my parents. He taught me how to drive. He helped me study for chemistry exams. He sat in the bleachers at my graduation. He took me out for pie after I got into pharmacy school. He never called himself a hero. He never said he saved me. He just showed up every single day in the ordinary, quiet ways that actually build a life. Which is why the phone call on May 3rd of 2024 changed everything. I was midway through a shift when I saw his name on my screen. He almost never called me at work unless it mattered. His voice was calm when I answered. Too calm. He said, I need you to come by after your shift. My doctor called with test results. When you work in healthcare, you learn there are tones people use when they are trying to sound steadier than they feel. I knew before he said the words. Stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer. No cure. Only treatment. 18 to 24 months if things went well. Less if they did not. I drove to his house after work and found him at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad full of notes. Appointment details, medication options, questions for the oncologist, side effects, prognosis. He had already organized his own collapse into categories. That almost broke me more than the diagnosis. I cried in the kitchen. He did not. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand and said, we do not have time to waste on panic. We document, we decide, we do the next right thing. Then he called my father. I heard only his side of the conversation. He said, Neil, the doctor says I have stage 4 lung cancer. I would like to see you before things get worse. There was a pause. He said, "Yes, I understand. Let me know when you can make it up. They did not come in May. They did not come in June. They did not come in July." On May 15th, my grandfather created a new folder on his computer. I happened to walk behind him and saw the name, for Imagine Timeline. I asked what it was. He gave me a thin, tired smile and said insurance. At the time I assumed he meant estate planning, end-of-life paperwork, legal cleanup, the practical things people do when they are dying. I had no idea he was building a case. 2 weeks later, I moved in. I gave notice on my apartment. I cut my hours at work. I moved my clothes back into the room I had grown up in. I turned the space between daughter and granddaughter and caregiver into one long blur of responsibility. He told me I did not have to do it. I told him he raised me for 24 years, and now it was my turn. He looked at me for a very long time. Morning light was coming through the kitchen window and catching in the silver at his temples. He looked smaller than he used to, tired in a way sleep does not fix. Then he said, "If anything happens to me and they try to say I gave up, you will know the truth. Promise me you will look for it." I promised. I wish I had asked more questions then. I wish I had understood the weight of what he was placing in my hands. The decline began slowly, then all at once. By August, he needed oxygen during the day. By September, he needed it almost constantly. His walk shortened from the bedroom to the kitchen, and then from the bed to the bathroom, and then eventually just from one side of the bed to the other. I did what my training told me to do. I organized pills. I tracked symptoms. I logged pain levels. I wrote down times and dosages and side effects and appetite changes and oxygen readings. I did not know I was collecting evidence. I thought I was loving him carefully. On September 8th, I wrote in my spiral notebook that his oxygen saturation was 87, and he was being admitted for pneumonia. On September 10th, I wrote that the fever had broken and his breathing sounded easier. On September 15th, I wrote that he had been discharged and home health would start Monday. That notebook became an extension of my hand. Date, time, medication, response, visitors, phone calls, changes in mood, changes in pain, every detail. The hospital stays came closer together after that. Short recoveries followed by harder crashes. The longest was from September 23rd through October 6th for a pain crisis and pleural effusion. 14 days. Room 512. I know that room number the way some people know prayer. Every morning I signed the visitor log. Imagine Conway, in at 7:15. Imagine Conway, back the next day, and the next, and the next. Sometimes I would glance at previous pages and feel this strange, awful mix of pride and anger. Pride because I was there. Anger because no one else was. A nurse named Jessica started bringing me coffee without asking. She had tired eyes and the kind of kindness that comes from seeing too much. One morning she glanced at the visitor sheet and asked if his son would be visiting. I said he says he will. I did not say he never does. Then came October 2nd. The day that would replay in my head long after everything else faded. I had been in the hospital for 8 hours. My grandfather was sleeping under the fog of morphine. I was in the vinyl chair beside the bed reviewing his medication chart when I heard voices in the hallway. My father's voice first, then my mother's. For one stupid second, I felt relief. The door opened. My father stepped in wearing an expensive jacket I knew he could not afford. My mother followed in oversized designer sunglasses, even though we were indoors, and the sky outside was gray. My grandfather's eyes opened slowly. He saw them, and something like hope crossed his face before he could stop it. My father did not move farther than the doorway. He asked, "How are you feeling?" in the same tone someone uses at a networking event when they do not want the real answer. My mother hovered near the door with her phone in her hand. Jessica appeared behind them and asked if they wanted to add themselves to the visitor schedule so the staff could coordinate. My father cut her off, said they were very busy. Said they would see how things went. They stayed 10 minutes. 10. In those 10 minutes my father asked about the will, my mother asked about the house. My grandfather was medicated and weak, and trying to stay oriented. He nodded because that is what dying people do when they no longer have the energy to fight every ugly thing said around them. Then my father finally looked at me. He sneered. He told me to stop wasting my time because Grandpa was dying anyway. My mother crossed her arms and said some people have actual lives to live. Then they turned and walked out. No hug, no kiss on the forehead, no promise to come back tomorrow. Just footsteps moving away down a fluorescent hallway while my grandfather tried not to watch them leave. Jessica stood in the doorway after they were gone. She did not speak. She did not have to. Her face said everything. She had seen enough families to know exactly what kind of people had just walked out of that room. That was the last time my parents visited him in the hospital. One visit. 10 minutes in 8 weeks. An hour later, my grandfather woke up again. He asked if they had left. I said yes. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Good. I do not want them to see what I am recording." I asked what he meant. He was already drifting back under before he answered. Or maybe he chose not to. By late October, he was discharged to home hospice. I turned my old childhood bedroom into a supply room and his room into a small private ward. Oxygen concentrator, medication bins, schedules taped inside cabinet doors, pill photos stored by date. Hospice instructions at the bedside. I ran his care like a pharmacist because that was what I knew, but underneath that there was something else happening, something I only understood later. He was watching me document. One night in early November, I was sorting his meds for the week. Morphine, dexamethasone, ondansetron, lorazepam. He watched me from the bed and said, "You are keeping track." I said, "Of course I am." He smiled, not a soft smile, a sad one. Then he said, "Keep that notebook somewhere safe. When I am gone, they are going to lie about me, about how I died, about what I wanted." I told him not to talk like that. He said the notebook is proof. I asked proof of what? He looked at the ceiling for a long second and said that I fought, that I was clear, that I did not give up. I wanted to believe the medication was making him dramatic. It was not. The phone calls from my father increased after that, not to ask about comfort, not to ask about pain, not to ask whether his father was afraid or sleeping or eating. He wanted numbers. What was the house worth now? Had the will been updated? Was there life insurance? Were the retirement accounts still intact? One night I passed the door and heard my grandfather say in a voice sharper than I had heard in weeks that he was not changing the will. He said everything was going to me. He said Neil had already taken more than enough over the years. He said if Neil wanted to contest it, then he should try. When he hung up, he saw me standing there. He told me Neil would fight after he was gone, but he was making sure I had what I needed. I believed him because I wanted to. I still did not know how far he had already gone to protect me. On November 17th, I wrote the last entry in my spiral notebook. Day 562. Oxygen 4 liters continuous. Morphine 15 milligrams every 3 hours. Pain 8 out of 10. Read him the newspaper. He asked about next week's weather even though we both knew he would not see it. He said I am not quitting Imagogen. I am just finishing. At 3:52 the next morning, he died with my hand around his. The room was silent in a way I had never heard before. No monitor alarm, no footsteps, no cough. No breath dragging against damaged lungs, just stillness and the sound of my own pulse in my ears. Then I remembered his last words. Find the box. At the time, grief swallowed the meaning. There was too much to do, calls to make, hospice paperwork, funeral home, death certificate, clothes, flowers, the ugly machinery that begins the minute love ends in paperwork. The funeral was 4 days later. I arrived early and sat alone with his casket in a quiet viewing room. I did not cry there. I had spent too many nights crying in the dark while he slept. By then I felt hollowed out, burned clean, like grief had already scraped me empty. Then the doors opened and my parents arrived performing sorrow like they had rehearsed it in the car. My mother entered already crying, loud, theatrical. My father carried a framed photo of my grandfather from the 1990s, when he still looked strong and healthy, and untouched by the final 18 months they had barely witnessed. They greeted mourners like surviving heroes. People who did not know any better touched their arms and offered condolences for the long, exhausting illness. My mother nodded as if she had spent sleepless nights at his bedside. My father accepted sympathy like he had earned it. Then he gave the eulogy. He stood at the podium and told a room full of people that watching his father decline had been the hardest thing our family had ever endured. He said he and my mother were grateful to me for being there when they simply could not bear to see him suffer. He said my grandfather taught him integrity. He said family means taking care of the people you love. I sat in the front row and counted lies until I lost track. After the service, Jessica found me by the coffee station. She had come on her day off. She told me my grandfather talked about me every single day. Then she slipped an envelope into my hand. Inside were photocopies of the visitor logs from all 3 admissions, 29 days total, my name on every single line. She told me families have a way of rewriting history, and I deserved proof that I was there. I thanked her and tucked the envelope into my bag. At the time, I thought that would be the worst of it. The insults, the performance, the way they used his funeral as a stage, I was wrong. After most people left, my father called a small family meeting in one of the funeral home's conference rooms. Just him, my mother, me. He had already contacted a realtor. My grandfather had been dead 4 days. The house was worth around $385,000 according to him. The market was good. We needed to move quickly. He had a business card ready. I told him the will left everything to me. He laughed, cold and short. He said the will had been written when Dad was sick and on medication, said they would contest it, said a judge would see diminished capacity. Said the fair thing would be to divide everything 3 ways. Fair. That word did something awful inside me. I walked out before I screamed. 3 days later, the certified letter arrived. Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance. Claim under review. Possible self-inflicted death. Information supplied by next of kin Neil Conway and Bryn Conway. Evidence submitted regarding mental state and medication usage. For a full second my brain refused to process it. Self-inflicted, suicide, medication. My grandfather had spent 18 months fighting for breath, and they were telling an insurance company he had chosen to end his life. I called the number on the letter and reached a claims adjuster named Jonathan Pierce. He explained in the flat professional tone of someone reading from notes that my father had reported an intentional overdose. He had submitted photos of prescription bottles found in the bedroom. Several were allegedly empty or nearly empty. He had also stated that my grandfather had expressed suicidal thoughts in the final weeks. Every word out of his mouth made me colder. I told him I was a clinical pharmacist. I told him I managed every dose personally. I told him my grandfather had exactly 4 active prescriptions and every one of them was tracked. I told him there was no overdose. He said they had to investigate. Then he mentioned 8 prescription bottles. 8. My grandfather had 4. That was the moment something shifted. Grief stepped aside. Rage took its place. I drove straight to the house. His bedroom was exactly as I had left it except for the nightstand drawer. Inside were 8 bottles lined up like props on a stage. 4 of them I recognized, 4 I did not. I picked up the first unfamiliar one. Oxycodone, Walgreens on East Washington. My grandfather never used that pharmacy, ever. His meds were always filled through UW Health because I handled them there myself. I checked the others. Same location, same suspicious timing. Labels that looked real at a glance and wrong under scrutiny. Doctor names I did not recognize. Someone had planted them. I photographed every bottle. Then I checked the prescription records. The 4 real meds matched perfectly. The 4 extra ones did not exist in the system. Fake numbers, false prescriber information. Fraud so sloppy it would have fallen apart under anyone who actually knew what they were looking at. I sat on the bedroom floor with those bottles around me and realized my parents had staged a suicide. They were not just contesting a will. They were trying to shrink the estate, by voiding the $750,000 life insurance policy. If they could paint my grandfather as unstable and self-destructive, then the claim could be denied. Smaller estate, bigger leverage, easier attack. And in that moment, I finally understood that my grandfather's warnings had not been paranoia. He knew. What I did not know yet was how much he had prepared. That answer came 4 days later on a bridge at sunrise. I was driving to work on November 29th when I saw my father's black Audi parked near the Rock River Bridge. I probably would have kept driving if not for the way he was standing in the center of the span, holding something tight against his side. A box, small, wooden, about the size of a thick shoebox. I pulled over and watched. He stood there for maybe 30 seconds, looked left, looked right, then threw it into the river. You already know what I did next. What you do not know is what happened after I dragged it onto the bank. The box was wrapped inside with layers of freezer bags and duct tape like someone had expected water and mud and panic. My grandfather had waterproofed the truth. The first thing I pulled out was a leather notebook sealed in plastic. The cover had one word on it: documentation. Underneath in his handwriting were the words for Imagine. May 2024 to November 2025. My hands were shaking so hard from the cold and shock that I could barely open it. The first page was dated May 15th. Day 1. Exact medication times, exact doses, photo reference numbers, notes. He had logged every pill he took from the day he started the notebook until the day before he died. 562 pages, 562 days, every dose, every time, every symptom. Every note, and on day 1 he had written that I moved in and he was starting the log so I would have proof he did not give up. I should have stopped there. It was already enough to crack me open. But beneath the notebook were 3 USB drives, 1 labeled videos, 1 labeled audio, 1 labeled documents, and under those there were stacks of papers, bank statements, copies of checks, receipts. Notes, legal papers, a sealed envelope. I opened the envelope on that muddy riverbank with numb fingers. Inside was a letter in my grandfather's handwriting. He wrote that if I was reading it then he was gone and they had tried to lie about how he died. He wrote that the box held 18 months of truth. He wrote do not let them rewrite the ending. He wrote you know the dosage. They will get it wrong. Prove it. I sat there soaked and freezing with mud on my clothes and blood on my knees, and I cried harder than I had at the funeral. Because suddenly, I understood that while I had been trying to keep him comfortable, he had been preparing for war. I called in sick to work and spread everything across my kitchen table. I started with the notebook. The entries were clinical and devastating. June 3rd, Neil called asking about my will, did not ask how I was feeling. Audio file 3. September 15th. Imagine brought me home and set up a medication chart. She photographs every pill. She learned that from me. October 2nd. Neil and Bryn visited hospital for 10 minutes. Neil asked if I changed my will. I said no. November 10th. If they say I overdosed, look at the log. Every pill accounted for, every dose photographed. I did not give up, I fought. Then came the videos. 72 of them. 1 every week, some short, some longer. He sat facing the camera in his reading glasses and calmly stated the date and his condition. Again and again, he declared that he was of sound mind. Again and again, he named me as the person caring for him. Again and again, he said his son would try to claim incompetence, and he was making the videos to stop him. In a video from November 10th, 8 days before he died. He looked thinner than I thought a human body could become and still hold a soul. His voice was weak. His eyes were not. He said if anyone claims I killed myself, they are lying. Look at the medication log. If there are extra bottles, they were planted. He said planted. He knew even that. Then I opened the audio files. 11 phone recordings. On the first one, my father was already pushing him about the house. On the second, he was questioning his judgment. On the third, he was suggesting the cancer and medication were affecting his decisions. By the later recordings, the pressure was uglier, more direct. My father threatened to drag the estate through probate for years. He said I would never see a dime. He told a dying man that if he did not change the will, then there would be consequences. My grandfather stayed maddeningly calm through all of it. Then came the documents drive. Official pharmacy printouts showing exactly 4 active prescriptions, the same 4 in my notebook. The same 4 in his, no mysterious extras, no hidden refills, no rogue prescribing physician. There were also bank statements. 27 withdrawals over 18 months totaling $63,000. Many were marked in my grandfather's handwriting with 2 words, Neil unauthorized. And under those statements was the ledger. 22 years of loans, dates, amounts, reasons, broken promises, running total, $329,000 lent to my father. 0 repaid. The final line read that if Neil tried to claim he deserved the estate, I should show him the ledger and then show him the door. I stayed up until 2 in the morning going through everything. By sunrise, I understood the full shape of what my grandfather had done. He had not simply left behind a defense against a will contest. He had created a comprehensive record of elder financial abuse, insurance fraud, coercion, false evidence, possible identity theft. He had documented his own dying with more discipline than most people bring to living. And at the center of it all was one unbearable truth. He knew his own son well enough to prepare for this before it happened. The next morning, I called the attorney whose business card my grandfather had quietly slipped into a cookbook months earlier and told me to keep safe. Douglas Brennan, Estate Law. He saw me that same afternoon. His office sat in downtown Madison, all dark wood and framed diplomas and old bookshelves. I carried the wooden box in with both hands like an organ transplant. He knew my name before I sat down, said Patrick talked about me often. I opened the box on his desk. Then I watched a man with 30 years of estate experience stop speaking for half an hour. He went through the medication log first, then the videos, then the bank statements, then the audio clips, then the fake bottle photos. When he finally looked up, his face had changed. He told me this was the most comprehensive documentation he had ever seen in estate practice. Then he said the words that turned grief into a case. This is not just a probate dispute. This is fraud. Within days, Douglas arranged a meeting with Northwestern Mutual's fraud investigator Rachel Kovat, senior investigator, 18 years in the field. She spread the fake bottle photos across the conference table and immediately started asking the right questions. How did a hospice patient collect scripts from a pharmacy he never used? Why did the labels reference a physician outside his network? Why did 4 bottles match no pharmacy system record at all? Then she opened her laptop. Walgreens had security footage from the date listed on the bottle labels. On the screen, my mother stood at the pharmacy counter. She was handing over what looked like prescriptions and presenting an ID. Rachel told us the identity used did not belong to my grandfather. It belonged to someone else. The photo matched my mother. The name did not. That meant identity theft and prescription fraud layered over insurance fraud, each one serious on its own. Together they were catastrophic. Rachel closed the laptop and looked at me very carefully. She told me if they proved fraud, my parents could face criminal charges. Prison was possible, maybe likely. This would not stay private. It would not be a simple family matter. She asked if I was prepared for that. The honest answer is I was not prepared for any of it. Not for the bridge, not for the fake bottles. Not for the videos of a dying man calmly predicting the exact shape of betrayal. But I was prepared to finish what my grandfather started. So I told her the truth. They made it loud when they lied at his funeral. I am just turning up the volume. The evidence kept building. My grandfather's oncologist gave a formal statement that at no point did Patrick Conway express suicidal ideation. He said the overdose claim was medically impossible given the documented dosing and prescription history. He confirmed my medication logs were exact and professional. Jessica, the nurse, gave a statement that I was there every day, and my father was not. A neighbor described seeing my car at the house daily, and told Douglas that my grandfather once said he was dying but not stupid, and he knew exactly what his son wanted. Former pharmacy colleagues remembered my grandfather talking about documentation and how people might lie about him later. 12 witness statements, medical records, visitor logs, pharmacy system records, security footage, audio threats, video testimony, a 562-day medication log that left almost no room for doubt. What did my parents have? 8 fake pill bottles, a performance at a funeral, and the assumption that a dying man would be too weak to defend himself. That was their mistake. Douglas scheduled what he called a settlement conference for January 15th of 2026. My parents arrived with an attorney I had never heard of. My father looked confident. My mother looked annoyed rather than nervous. They still believed this was a negotiation. They still thought they could scare me into compromise. Douglas slid a thick binder across the table. He told them it was a copy of the evidence already provided to the insurer's fraud unit and the district attorney's office for review. I watched their faces as they turned pages. The medication log, the visitor logs, the bank statements, the fake bottle analysis. Then Douglas played one of the videos. My grandfather appeared on screen, frail, oxygen tubing at his nose, eyes clear as glass. He stated the date, stated he was of sound mind, stated that Neil had threatened to contest the will, stated that he wanted everything to go to me because I was the one who had cared for him and Neil had already taken enough. My mother began crying for real that time. My father went rigid. Their attorney asked what exactly he was looking at. Douglas told him he was looking at evidence of insurance fraud, elder financial abuse, identity theft, false reporting, coercion of a vulnerable adult. Then he laid out the options. Option 1, they confess, repay the $63,000 in unauthorized withdrawals over 24 months. Withdraw every claim against the estate. Issue a public statement admitting the false insurance allegations. Stop contesting the will. Option 2. Full criminal referral with every document and recording attached. My father looked at me then, really looked at me, not like a daughter, not like a person. Like an obstacle that had somehow grown teeth. He asked if I was really going to do this to my own parents. I told him no. Grandpa did this. I am just proving he was right about you. My mother broke first. She started sobbing and said they did not think anyone would check. Said once he was gone, it would all be easier. Said they thought nobody would question it. Nobody would question it. That sentence will live in me for the rest of my life, because it was never just about the money. It was about contempt, the certainty that a caregiver is invisible. The certainty that the person doing the work is too tired to fight. The certainty that the dead cannot answer back. Their attorney withdrew from the case on the spot. 48 hours later they signed the confession, not because they were sorry, because prison sounded worse. They admitted filing a false insurance claim, admitted planting fraudulent evidence, admitted financial exploitation during my grandfather's final illness, agreed to repay the money, agreed not to contest the will, agreed to a public statement. When my father signed, his hand shook. When it was over, he looked at me with all the bitterness of a man who had just discovered that his victim came with records. He said, "You won," and I told him the only true thing left to say. Grandpa won, I just proved it. Northwestern Mutual concluded the investigation 2 weeks later. No evidence of suicide, strong evidence of fraud, claim approved in full. The check arrived on February 3rd, $750,000, the will was executed, the house, the retirement accounts, the insurance. Total estate value a little over $1.13 million. A public statement from my parents appeared in the Wisconsin State Journal admitting they filed a false claim and made false statements about his mental state and medication use. 3 sentences. No love in them, no remorse, just damage control. I clipped the article and kept it anyway, not as a trophy, as proof that truth can be slow and ugly and exhausting and still win. You might think that is where the story ends. Money recovered, fraud exposed, parents disgraced, case closed. It is not, because the hardest part came after the meetings, after the signatures, after the adrenaline, after the final legal envelope was filed away. The hardest part was going back into my grandfather's house when it was finally mine, and realizing there would never again be a voice in the kitchen asking if I had eaten. Never again a newspaper folded at his spot at the table. Never again his slippers by the bed or his glasses beside a half-finished crossword. Justice is loud when it arrives. Grief is quiet when it stays. A few months later, I was sorting through one of his desk drawers when I found one more USB drive tucked behind the back panel. It had slipped out of sight. The label said final for Imagine. Play when ready. I sat in his office to watch it. He had recorded it 8 days before he died. He was so thin in that video it hurt to look at him. But his eyes were kind and steady and fully himself. He said that if I was watching, then everything had worked out the way he planned. He said I found the box, found the truth, proved them wrong. Then he said something that nearly took me apart. He said he was proud of me, not because I won, because I fought for what was right even when it hurt. Then he told me something I had not fully understood until that moment. He said I did not just take care of him in those final months. I gave him a reason to keep fighting. He told me to take the house and the money and the time he bought me with all that documentation and build something beautiful, something that helped people, something that proved love is not biology. It is showing up. Then the screen went black. I sat alone in his chair in the room where he had taught me to track the truth. And for the first time since the day he died, I cried without anger in it. Not for the case, not for the lies, not for the money, for the unbearable mercy of being seen, because that was the gift inside everything he left behind, not the insurance, not the house. Not the legal proof. He documented me too, my staying, my care, my witness, my love. He made a record so no one could ever tell me that what I did was small or ordinary or forgettable. So I used the money the way he asked. In February of 2026, I approached UW Health Community Outreach with an idea for a medication adherence program for elderly patients. Free medication management, education, documentation support, help for people living alone or overwhelmed or slipping through cracks that can kill. They agreed to partner. By March, we had secured space and staff. By April, the Conway Care Medication Management Program launched. We started with 15 patients, then 50, then more. Every patient gets a medication log on day 1. Inside the front cover are the words my grandfather taught me in 100 different ways. Dosage matters. Documentation matters. You matter. 6 months after he died, the program was serving hundreds of people. I stood in the house he left me and looked around at what his last act of love had made possible. My parents were gone from my life by then. We do not speak. I do not spend energy hating them. Hate is another bill they do not get to send me. I just know this now. Family is not the people who cry the loudest at your funeral. Family is the one who learns your medication schedule, the one who signs the visitor log, the one who stays for the breathing treatments and the paperwork and the silence after midnight, the one who notices when your water glass is empty, the one who listens when your voice gets weak, the one who remains when remaining is boring and painful and inconvenient and necessary. Love is not announced. It is logged. It is tracked in minutes spent, and miles driven and chairs slept in, and pages filled out by hand when your eyes burn from exhaustion. If you are taking care of someone right now, then hear me. What you are doing matters, even if no one thanks you, even if siblings vanish until money is mentioned. Even if extended family praises themselves online while you are the one cleaning up prescriptions and calling doctors and losing sleep. You matter. And if there is one lesson my grandfather gave me that I want to hand to you tonight, it is this: document everything, not because you are paranoid. Because truth is fragile when powerful people need a different story. Write down the dates, keep the receipts, save the texts, photograph the pills, track the visits, trust details. Because someday you may need to prove what love looked like in a room where no one else bothered to show up. I still have the leather notebook from the river. I still have the visitor logs Jessica copied for me. I still have the newspaper clipping with my parents' confession. And sometimes late at night, after the office is closed, and the house is quiet, I take out that first notebook my grandfather gave me when I was 11. The one with the fading cover and my uncertain handwriting. I turn to the first page where he wrote documentation for Imagine, practice notes. He knew before I did. He knew I would need a map through betrayal. He knew I would need proof. He knew the truth would have to be carried by someone who loved it enough to write it down. And he was right. If this story stayed with you, then do not just move on. Subscribe to the channel right now. Like this video so more people who are carrying caregiving alone can find it. Then comment your city and tell me who you are showing up for. A parent, a grandparent, a partner, a child, yourself. And if you have ever been the one left in the room after everyone else found an excuse to leave, then I want you to hear this clearly. You were never the weak one. You were the witness. You were the proof. You were the love that stayed. And that matters more than any lie ever told after the flowers die.